heavy our gauges on the dash, and the transmission held up beautifully. So, we got to Babcock State Park. We pulled in, got set up. We intended to do a short walk or a short hike. We walked through the campground. We met a couple, Kenneth and Elaine. If you guys are listening, hi. How are yous? And we got into a really nice conversation with them. So after that, we went back to the rig, cooked dinner, which was our pizza from Miguel's. And then we were going to go for another walk, and we met up again with Kenneth and Elaine, and they came over to the rig, and we sat and talked for a couple of hours. Really pleasurable. So the next day, we had a few different trails in the park that we wanted to do, and we hiked a little over 6 miles or so. Very pretty. A beautiful mill in that park. And if you want pics, here you go. There's a link to them in the show notes from the Instagram post. The next morning, we dumped and filled. So we've learned years back, and we didn't do it at one point in this trip, and we regretted not doing it. Anytime there's a dump, we dump. And anytime there's water and anytime we dump, we fill with water. This way our freshwater tank's always full and our black is always empty. We skipped doing that once, and we got into a little bit of a jam with water, so we reminded ourselves of that. You know, again, I'm retired. Next month will be 4 years, and in all the travels, that's our rule. Now, I know we are the oddballs, okay? When we travel less than 4 hours, hopefully somewhere around an hour and a half travel time in the rig. That's not typical. It's not what you guys do, right? We stay a minimum of 2 nights at a stay, so we are not hopping day after day after day driving. So that's different. If we don't care about driving with a full tank of fresh water. Our rig weighs 18,000 pounds. At 80 gallons of fresh water, at 8 pounds to a gallon, another 650 pounds ain't gonna mean all that much to our gas mileage. So if we can, well, that's not true. If we can dump, we dump, and if it's free. And if we need to dump, we have to pay, then we dump. But anytime we dump, we always fill with fresh water. And we have a time that we could do 5 nights easily on our fresh water and our holding tanks without dumping or filling. So we know every 5 days, and if we need to stretch it out, we can do up to 7 if we're super careful. So we know we just have to dump anywhere from every 4 to 7 days. And that's how we roll, folks. Again, I'm sure it's not how you guys do it. And that's the wonderful thing about RVing and life. Do it the way that works for you. So the next day, we drove over, or that day we dumped, filled. We drove over to Calhoun County Park. We found this place online. It was $20 a night with 30 amp and water. Now they didn't have a dump there, and we knew that going in. That's why we dumped before heading there. There was really no one else there. There was a couple people training dogs for search and rescue. But they were busy doing what they were doing, so we didn't really interact with them at all. Um, but there's nothing, or so we believe, there was nothing to do in that park or within 30 miles of that park. And we didn't take that into account when we booked it. So when we find these obscure places from now on, we're going to try to remember to search on Google Maps in the area things to do. If the park's not big enough to keep us busy and there's nothing to do for 30 miles, then we're not going to do it. So it was 85 degrees. It was really humid. It was disgusting. We didn't even want to walk around the park. So we just kind of sat in the air conditioning and relaxed. So the next day, we drove over to the sweeter side of the Feud Winery. It was a little over an hour from the park. So this park is owned by Mark Hatfield. Mark Hatfield of the Hatfield and McCoy Feud fame. So we were really interested in going to this winery. A couple of years ago, we were at Carter Caves up in northern West Virginia. And we were talking to a park ranger, and he mentioned that one of the Hatfields or one of the McCoys had been there at that park the week before, and had we been there, we could have met them. And this like piqued our interest. We didn't know there was any Hatfields or McCoys around anymore. So, once we heard that a couple years ago, we knew we had to meet one of them. And here we were. The sweeter side of the Feud. And they also have a winery. They have a distillery. They make moonshine. We met Mark Hatfield, who is the great-great-grandson of Devil Anse Hatfield from the Feud. An hour and a half just sitting and talking to him. What an interesting fellow. Very down to earth. So we walked into the building. Brenda, his wife, invited us over to sample some of their wines. We did. Now again, we're in the South, so a lot of sweet wines, and we're not really into sweet wines, or at least Trish isn't. So from there, we walked down the length of the bar to where Mark was standing, and we said hi. He said hi. We started talking, and he just started pouring samples of different bourbons, whiskeys, and moonshines. They had to have 40 different flavors, 40 different types. It was just unbelievable. They had all the bottles out on the bar. He was just pouring, and he said, "Do you like this? Try this." And he started pouring samples. Now, a lot of the samples were full shots. And then I would ask him about one of the other flavors, and he would grab that bottle and pour a shot. Try that. So knowing we were driving out of there, they do have a bucket so you can dump what you don't like into the bucket so you don't have to drink it. So from there, I mentioned another of the flavored bourbons, and he said, "Help yourself. Just take some. See what you think." We could have sat there and drank shot after shot after shot and not bought a thing. Unbelievable. So we started counting the flavors, and I stopped counting after 42 flavors. So when I would sample a flavor, I would put a couple of drops in the shot glass, and just enough to get it on my lips, on my tongue, and taste it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have survived walking out of there. So the one thing I wish we stocked up on different bourbons and stuff. I bought one of their shirts. So we got our fair share of stuff from that distillery. But the one thing I wish I had done was gotten a picture of me with Mark. I kicked myself. It's really a shame. Oh well. Next time, right? We saved it as a heart. We'll be back. So in the show notes, I have a link to the website. From there, we went over to Chestnut Ridge Winery. We bought a bottle of wine and sat on their porch. We were the only ones there. They were on top of this mountain. We made it there in the Jeep. We definitely would not have made it there in the RV. Hence the mountains that I talked about earlier, right? But there's a link to their website for this winery in the show notes. So this winery is in a town that the song Almost Heaven, West Virginia. You know the song, right? So this is not the town that the song was written about. It's a town that embraces itself as the heart of West Virginia. It was a Sunday. Everything was closed. We drove up and down the main street. We will not be going back to that town. So there you go. So we went back to the rig. We figured we'd have another quiet evening. It was cooling off a lot. So we decided to walk around the county park where we were. And we grew a greater appreciation of this park. Walking around, they have a few different ponds. They have trails around. The trails are not great hiking trails. They're more like clearings in woods or across a grass field. But the ponds are really cute. They also have a historic village, which they do not advertise. But there it was, and they had a school, a post office, stuff like that. Wasn't open, probably. This whole park is developed and maintained by volunteers, so I would imagine weekends and during a week during the summer. So who knows? So we knew that night was going to be the Lunar Eclipse in May of 2022, and this county park is touted as a dark sky area. So we pulled out the 35 millimeter, the tripod, sat out and took pictures up until around 12:30 at night of the eclipse happening and the full moon, which was the red moon. Awesome. They're on Instagram if you want to see the pictures. The next morning, we hooked up. We filled up with fresh water. We stopped at a rest area on the highway that we found had a free dump, so we dumped there. We use rvdumps.com to find these places. It was on Route 79. So from there we headed off to the Monongahela National Forest and Seneca Rocks State Park. We had no signal for the majority of the ride in, and no signal at all while there. Getting there, the road to go in, we were going up and down again. We were staying at Seneca Shadow Campground. Again, the 10-12% grade hills unbelievable.